Hello there everyone and welcome to John Drinks, the channel which I, John, have a drink, and today I'm drinking a cup of tea. Today I'm going to be talking about books instead, but not just any books. We're not just kind of having like a little bit of a book club. There's tea pouring everywhere because that is a really difficult angle to get a cup of tea from. I did not think this video through, and that will become readily apparent in the next looks at pile of books. 40 minutes maybe? I don't know how long this is going to be. I have before me, slightly off shot, a massive pile of books about whiskies and gins and beers and wine and all other manner of alcoholic beverages. So I thought it would be fun for me to go through my collection and talk about the ones that I think are worth buying, looking through, and ones that might be of interest to people who want to learn a bit more about their gin or their whiskey or their beer or their wine. I have a mission at the minute to try and learn a bit more about wine in 2021 because it's a massive black hole in my knowledge. So there's a book in here which has been a fairly recent release, which we'll be talking about as well. But I want to quickly say as well, none of the books that feature in this section today are going to be ridiculously difficult to get your hands on. They're going to be readily available from bookshops or online, that kind of a thing, because I do have things in my collection such as this. This is the Fanny and Johnnie Cradock cooking program volume 2 from the 1970s. Why do I have this? I don't really know, to be honest. A few years ago the BBC started repeating Fanny Cradock Cooks for Christmas, and I was like, at first I thought it was a drag act, and I was like, what is this monstrosity I'm seeing on my screen? And I kind of dug it. Don't get me wrong, Fanny Cradock as a person was a cunt, a 100% absolute bastard. She was an evil person. But her over-the-top, ridiculous sort of style really intrigued me, and I'm a big fan of like kitschy stuff anyway, and she is sort of the queen of kitsch. She put food colouring in fucking everything. But why I have this collection is her husband was big into his wines, and with each issue he would talk a little bit about, I'm not sure if you can even see that, about wines. So we've got here aperitifs and other fortified wines. So there's a little collection here: San Pellegrino, Martini, Campari, Stock 84, which I'm not even sure I've ever come across before. There's stuff in here about sherry and port and all sorts. I'm done talking about the niche stuff because these are not easy to get your hands on. I'm half tempted to photocopy this at some point so everyone can kind of have a look at it, but I mean, she's not going to care. She's been dead for 30 years, so we'll put that down there. And I'll get started at the top of my pile with two books from the same author. These are both from Dave Broom. He is known first and foremost as a whiskey writer, but he's actually a general spirits communicator. People in the communications category exist in pretty much every niche: science communications, astromycology communications, plumbing communications. It's a sort of a niche subset of people, which basically means you talk about something that you have an interest in. That's all that means. And occasionally people win awards for it, and it's all very lovely. This guy is a spirits communicator, and he's well known in the industry for just kind of having a no-nonsense approach to his writing style, and also just being a generally affable and lovely person, and sort of waxing poetical about the spirits that he talks about. He not so long ago released a film called The Amber Light. It was on the Edinburgh Film Festival. This was back in 2019? 18 probably, actually. I think it was a good long while ago, and then it wasn't released for general media for absolutely ages, and I finally got my hands on a copy, and it's great, and I recommend you go and at least rent it. But these first two, I'm also going to quickly say, because you'll probably notice, that is from when my ceiling fell down at the last flat. That is all impact damage on this book. So yeah, that was a fun time, wasn't it? That was a fun bit of the canon that I have created here. So the format of these books are very simple to follow. So in the opening there, we've got a fair bit of the history of the spirit. It goes into the rum as well, about the history of gin, the history of rum. And then later on, it goes a little bit into kind of like the process, so like what pot stills are and that sort of a thing. And then after that, we actually get into the gins category. And this is my favourite bit of these because it's sort of just a breakdown of bottles for you to try. And they each have little individual ratings. And he's tested them quite thoroughly. So it's not just like me where I'm just going, tastes kind of like licking a wall. You know, he's gone into it. So with each category, like we've got Gordon's here, there's sort of a history of the company, picture of the bottle obviously, your salient information about botanicals, ABV at the top, and then he tests them. So he tests them in a gin and tonic with Sicilian lemonade, as a Negroni, and as a martini. And depending on the different categories of gin or gin adjuncts that he's trying, he'll change up how he tests them. So some of them he only tests them in particular kinds of cocktails, whereas other he tests them with gin and tonics and stuff like that. And he obviously he does note that, you know, these things are kind of subjective. These are his take on them, but from what he's found, these things work the best. And I have made several purchases off the back of this book, because I kind of, if I look at a bottle, I'm kind of like, I wonder what that's like, and I trust this guy. He knows what he's on about, so I have a flick through and look at sort of the flavour camp notes. It's the same with the rum book. Let me just get straight to the bottlings at the back. Yeah, so here we are, one for Mount Gay, and again he has it with different mixes, so coconut water, ginger beer, as an old-fashioned, with clementine juice, which is a bit of an odd one. If you've never tried rum with clementine juice, I highly recommend it. It's actually really good. The only place I've been able to find clementine juice is Marks and Spencer's. So, not the most easy to get your hands on if you don't have an M&S handy, but that's where to find it. And with cola, he doesn't specify the kind of cola. One would assume it's the red label that we all know and love to hate. But yeah, it's an interesting mix. I think if I was to test some of these out, and the ones that you said go really well, coconut water, I think I'd probably disagree, because I really don't like coconut water. I don't get it. I do not get the appeal of it. Okay, it's hydrating, great, so is water. But anyway, it's so full, and for things like, if you're looking to get into a particular, like, you know you like some rums, but you want to see like the full breadth of it, there's loads of bottlings in here which I had no idea existed. And I do refer back to it every now and then and go, ooh, you know what, I fancy a bottle of rum, what shall I go for? And I kind of use this to kind of inform my shopping sometimes. That having been said, I haven't made a rum purchase for a while, so I should probably get on that at some point. So that was two collections. The Manual by David Broom. We've got gin and rum here. I do believe there is a whiskey one as well, because that would just kind of make sense. Next we have some work by Pete Brown. This guy is a beer writer. He started out a few years ago, and I think his first work was actually crowdfunded. I'm not 100% on that. Don't take that as given or fact. Again, I have two books here. I've got this one, which is Miracle Brew, and this, do you know, I'll read the blurb actually. Beer is the most popular alcoholic drink on the planet, but few who enjoy it know much about how its four ingredients, hops, malted barley, water and yeast, miraculously combine. From the birth of brewing in the Middle East, throughout the surreal madness of drink-sodden hop blessings in the Czech Republic, and the sun-stunning recreation of the first ever modern beer, Miracle Brew is an extraordinary journey through the nature and science of the world's greatest beverage. Along the way, we'll meet and drink with a cast of characters who reveal the magic of beer and celebrate the joy of drinking it. It's a non-fiction book, but it's written in the style of prose, so it's very conversational. I'm about halfway through this book. I like to kind of pick it up and then sort of put it down and then pick it up again. It's one of these ones that I kind of go back to periodically rather than sit down and read it the whole way through. I'm a bit weird when it comes to reading. I tend to do that. I'll pick up a book, read it for a few chapters, put it down, go to something else. I'm a really picky and weird reader, and that does mean that there are some books that I've just kind of never finished because they kind of got overlooked in favour of other books. It does happen. But I love his style on this one. This is at the extreme other end of how he... There's not really much to see there. It's just a book, this one. But this is more at the extreme other end of his sort of writing style. And the other one, which we're going to get into here, this is The Pub. It did used to have a dust jacket. I don't know what happened to it. But this is... I can't think of how to describe it other than it is a love letter to the British institution that is The Pub. And nothing is off the table. That's what I love about this particular one. The contents page there, and it goes through by region. And it talks a little bit about kind of like how pubs came about, why are pubs named a lot of the same things, like, I mean, it gives 4 examples here: the Coach and Horses, the Lion and Lobster, the Lord Nelson, and the King's Arms. I've actually been in the Lion and Lobster. Adorable little pub, really cute. It's got this, it's it just kind of feels like you're going into somebody's home. You know, they're the best pubs, aren't they? When you kind of just feel like you've walked in someone's living room, admittedly an antique, beautifully ornate living room, but still. Yeah, and it doesn't quite take itself very seriously. Like the sign there, for example, it's hand drawn, and there's a lobster, like on its tail, with a lion on the beach, and the lion's holding like a pot for when it's going to eat the lobster. It's very kind of grim, actually, but yeah, it's sort of an institution in where was I when I went in? The Bristol? No, not Bristol. What am I on about? Brighton. Sorry, Brighton. Getting my B's mixed up. It also breaks down kind of like the different types of pubs. So what the difference is between an ale house, an inn, a tavern. Most people don't know that taverns were usually where you would get wines. You know, it's not gone forward. Like, people think of a tavern as just like an old world kind of way of saying pub. It's not the case. It was a specialised kind of a pub. Yeah, and it also does kind of acknowledge kind of like fall and rise and stuff. So it does talk about like old school pubs, and it talks about new modern craft beer places as well. And it lumps them all in the same umbrella and talks about them with the same reverence. So it's not one of these books that goes, oh, old pubs are best, the ones with the carpet smell of stale piss and sick. New crafty ones, oh, they're too bright and I don't like them. You know, it paints them all with this same love of the institution, and it just acknowledges that, you know, it's just a different way of having the same sort of an idea, basically. I always come back to this book because it's beautifully written, and it's this fantastic kind of like analysis of what makes a pub amazing. It's almost like if George Orwell's essay, The Moon Underwater, was strung out, like really properly deep dived. It's beautifully done. The photography in it as well is fantastic. I love the look of a lot of these, and it really does kind of make something which is almost like an afterthought. Everyone loves the pub, but they don't love thinking or reading about the pub in a lot of cases, and I think that's a shame, because it's something that is uniquely, I don't want to sound like a fucking UKIP member right now, but it is uniquely British. You know, it is something that's kind of part of our cultural heritage, and it's, you know, it's quaint in its own little way, and I don't know what we would do without them. Also, I speak from working in pubs as well. You know, I kind of have seen firsthand what works and what doesn't. And the usual answer is whenever a chain gets their hands on it, it's when things start to go downhill. But I mean, that's not for here or now. Also, this has kind of informed a lot of sort of places that I want to check out. Of all the books that I'm going to go through, this is probably one of my favourites, because it is just sort of it's a love letter to pubs, and I can't think of any other way to describe it. And there's an earnestness to it and a genuineness to sort of the love of the institution that is the pub, and it has inspired me to try and do something. The plan in 2020 was to start doing a series about pubs. For obvious reasons, that has not happened. So I'm looking forward to sort of revisiting that concept, but this is the book that wanted me to do that, and I still want to do it. So hopefully that'll happen at some point in the future, once we get our fucking house in order. Next, I'm going to come back to this one, actually. So I'm going to... this next book is an annual whiskey almanac, but it's not written by a sexist piece of shit, so that's helpful. This is Charles McLean's Whiskypedia. I have not really encountered anyone that has read this and doesn't love it. For the simple reason that, again, it's similar to some of the other books that we've gone through in that it talks about sort of individual distilleries. And it talks about kind of like the style, the history of them, what they produce, how they produce it. And it gives, like, you know, basic information, like, you know, who owns it, when was it built, what's its capacity, that kind of a thing. It does not, just double check, it definitely doesn't actually. Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't break it down by region, which I'm a big fan of. I think in this day of age that whiskies on menus should be broken down alphabetically. Regions have long since stopped being relevant. This idea that it's from the lowlands, it tastes like this, it's from the highlands, it tastes like this, it's crap. It's absolute bullshit. It went out a second that the rail came about, pretty much, because, you know, you could start transporting peated barley from Islay to other parts of Scotland and start making peated expressions in the Highlands. They didn't, but they could have done. You know, the infrastructure to do that kind of thing has been there for a long time now. But anyway, back onto the book rather than my own feelings. It's heavy. It's more sort of a reference guide than anything else, but it's so lovingly written that it's readable. There are some reference materials, and actually I'm going to pick one out because I feel like I need to name and shame a little bit. Oh, this is going to be tricky actually. I'm going to have to move some stuff. Right, this is another, it's not even really a reference, but it's a book about the pub. The history of the English pub, and it is one of the most boring things I've ever read in my life. You can make writing about alcohol or talking about alcohol really engaging and interesting. It's not that difficult because it's quite an engaging and interesting subject to begin with. To make it this dull, and to make a subject that I was already interested in this boring, I have never gone back and picked this up because it reads like a school textbook. But like one of those really crappy school textbooks where it is the driest possible thing, and it is... Anyway, I'm not going to go any further into that. Unlike that example, this one is beautifully written. It's matter of fact. It is, you know, it's very factually accurate. It has lots of dates and figures in there, but it's written in such a way that it flows, and it's complete as well. So complete from A to Z. And this guide has been out for many years, and again, it's one of these ones that I go back to. Normally when I'm doing a whiskey review, this is the book that I will pick up just to kind of like give myself a quick bit of information about kind of like the distillery and stuff, and 9 times out of 10 it doesn't come up. You know, most of the time I don't talk about what I've read, but it's kind of to get me ready to talk about it in a weird way. So even though I don't use a lot of the information that I end up reading in this, it's really useful in that regard. And it's also really useful for somebody that's starting to get into whiskey and they kind of want to know where to go from here. It does not necessarily make recommendations, it just lays out all the facts and you can kind of make your own conclusions or do a bit more of your own research. That's more why this is here. But it is still wonderful. The bar that I mean it's closed at the minute, but the bar I work in, there's one of these behind the bar because it's just useful. It's a tool as much as it is a book. We're going to go back onto beer for a second here. This is some of the work by Melissa Cole. This is The Little Book of Craft Beer. I've actually owned another one of her books. I can't remember the title of it and I don't have it anymore. I think I gave it away to somebody, but it's fine. So I picked this up and it's a lovely little sort of guide in regards to kind of like breaking down what is beer, basically. What goes into it, what are the ingredients, why are they important. But there's also this lovely little section about beer and food, which I really like. Melissa Cole is a huge advocate of beer pairings, basically. It's something that it's kind of gone to the wayside a little bit. Even channels like Sorted Foods and stuff, you know, when they feature beer, it's never to pair it with food, it's just be kind of like, oh, here's a lad and we're testing out a gadget that carbonates it or something, you know, it's one of those kind of things. I have done a few beer and food pairings in the past. Actually, there was an event that we did, again, I'm going to talk about the bar that I was working at. It was a fierce beer event and it was a beer and food pairing. It didn't go very well, but that's because we put it on at the wrong time of year. Lesson learned, don't put on an event in January, it doesn't fucking work. But the actual menu that we came up with was really good and it really fucking worked. So we know for a fact that this kind of thing does work and you should try it. And then after that, it breaks down. So it has chapter points and there's one here, lager, and obviously it talks about lagers. So you've got different kinds, ones that are readily available, ones that you might not necessarily have heard of, and there's a couple of like cocktail suggestions as well, because beer cocktails are a thing. And then you've got session beers, so there's 4 Pure Session IPA there. Further on there's Wheats and Weisens. I'm definitely pronouncing that wrong, aren't I? And then there's bits about fruit beers and all sorts. It's sort of a reference guide as much as anything else. There's these beautiful illustrations in it, and again, the writing is clear and wonderful and just full of love for the subject. I think what I like about most of these books so much is that the writing has a very clear style and it tells a story as much as anything else. It's not just, this is a beer, it's made like this, I like it, next, you know. Because even writing a book like this, it takes time. You know, putting words on print, it's not easy. Melissa Cole is one of the most respected names in beer. And she was one of really the, I don't want to say pioneering, but she was one of the first like sort of women in the scene to gain any notoriety for sort of like, you know, women interested in beer. Beer's had this, it's been a really blokey drink for a while. You know, it suffers from that kind of reputation a little bit, in the same way that kind of like Prosecco is a woman's drink. You know, it's absolute crap. But she sort of, you know, showed that it doesn't matter. It's just beer at the end of the day, and if you love it, you love it. Get on with it. That's part of the reason why I love these books, because there's no, I've referenced it, there's no reference to that in this book. She just gets on with it, which is the way to do it. Get on with it and let people make their own minds up. I love it. If you've ever wondered why I know so much about sherry, this next book is going to answer that question. This is Sherry. It's an old copy of sherry and it's covered in all sorts of stuff. It's been stored in all sorts of less than ideal conditions. I still pick it up at least once a week and read through it. I must have read the entire thing back to back 2-3 times by now, which is not easy when it's a big old book. This is what people refer to as a coffee table book. I hate that term. Books are more than ornaments. There was a film that I was watching on the train back, and it was about book collectors and like antique book dealers, and they were all basically saying, "Oh yeah, we don't do this to read them." It's like, what are you doing? A book like this, you would expect it to be quite a dry subject, talking about kind of like how, you know, how sherry is the thing that, you know, your maiden aunt drinks and stuff like that. I'm going to read you the first couple of lines from the first page. As my train pulled into the station in Sherry's historic capital, Jerez de la Frontera, rain splattered against my window and onto the platform below. I was half awake with a mosaic of half-eaten jamon bocadillo. I'm not Spanish. Stuck to the front of my sweater. Classically overpacked, yet without an umbrella in January, a month so rainy it makes you forget that arid Morocco is anywhere near Jerez. You would assume that this was a book about travel, and in a respect it is. It talks so much about the bodegas, and it goes into great lengths about the different kinds of soils, the terroir. In fact, I've actually stumbled upon the grape and soil styles of the Sherry Triangle. You intermittently get these little beige inserts which go into the more technical information, and they break up the more sort of romanticised prose of the rest of the book. Again, the photography in it is stunning. It's amazing. I absolutely love this, and it is the reason why I know as much about sherry as I do. It's sort of stood out as the wine that interests me to date. And we're going to work on that with my next book. This is the most recent release out of the books that I'm going to be talking about today, and this is Wine from Another Galaxy by Noble Rot. Noble Rot started as a wine publication magazine, and then it evolved into a restaurant, and now it's a book. These guys write incredible things. They're a bit snooty, I'm not going to lie. I don't think they think they're being snooty, but they are a bit snooty. They're very much sort of the your Waitrose standard kind of, you know, the finer things in life, and they're a bit unashamed about it. What I love about this is it's very editorial. I mean, bright colours, beautiful design, and it is excellently written. It's that kind of snobby, up its own arse kind of writing that I'm kind of into. I kind of like slightly pretentious writing every once in a while, because it can be so over the top and ridiculous. You're just like, you can't make this up. This is from another planet, which, I mean, kind of ties into the title a little bit. They'd probably disagree with me. It just is, though. Sorry, it just is. Despite that, it has this weird approachability about it, where it talks about the subject. So, for example, like there's a breakdown here. This is actually guest written by somebody else, and it talks about. Essentially, it's just saying why Noble Rot is amazing. It's just a gushing, great big, Noble Rot's amazing and you should go there. But the way that it's written is so... There's a lyrical quality to it, which I love. Again, I never tire of talking about the photography in these books. It's fantastic. And interspersed, there is these really useful bits, like how wine is made. You know, it's one of those things where, like, you know, we know that it's made with grapes. Do people still stomp on them? You know, there's lots of questions behind it. And it talks about kind of like, you know, what difference the different kinds of vineyards make and the different kind of grapes and stuff. I am hoping to slowly help. I mean, also, I just love the colours as well. It's very artsy, you know. It's very aesthetic. I like aesthetic things. And it's almost kind of like a collection of articles in some respects. Like, for example, I'm going to go back here. This is talking about when there was a cellar collapse at Pol Roger. It is 2 a.m. on the 23rd of February 1900, and Maurice Roger, co-owner of Pol Roger Champagne, is woken up by what he presumes to be thunder at home in Epinay, northern France. Thinking little of it, he goes back to sleep. At 4 a.m, Maurice is woken again by a second, more apocalyptic sound, like a train crash, and gets out of bed to investigate. Downstairs, he finds the 3-story section of his extensive wine cellar has collapsed, destroying countless bottles of champagne and entombing others in chalk and clay. Attempts are made to rescue the undamaged stock, but at 32 metres below ground and dangerously unstable, these are soon abandoned. Nobody knows the exact quantities for sure, but more than 1 million bottles are lost, threatening the company with bankruptcy. I can't explain why I like the style of this so much, particularly given that there's a lot of guest writing in this. This is a wonderful little breakdown as well of what goes into a £5 bottle, a £10 bottle, and a £50 bottle. Because, you know, let's have a jump to approachability there. It's just called Finding a Good Source. I am still getting to grips with this book. And the last book, or books, that I'm going to be talking about today is actually a collection all from the same author, and it's part of an ongoing series. This is the most recent one. It's by Tristan Stephenson, and it's the Curious Bartender Volume 2, A New Testament in Cocktails. And it is... I first got this one about 5 years ago now for Christmas, and I've since got the entire collection. I do have the whiskey version somewhere. I think it's still at work, which I can't get to at the minute. But he talks about pretty much everything, to be fair. So there's a whiskey one out there. There is Curious Bartender Volume 1 and 2. These are to do with cocktails. So he goes through kind of like fundamentals, basic equipment, how you do things like clarification. He goes a little bit into like the science of juicing and air drying, a little bit into the science of ice as well, like, you know, what is the process that makes ice melt and the kind of like the transfer of energy and stuff, so it gets a bit scientific. This guy is sort of an advanced mixologist, you know, he's sort of the not the Tristan Stephenson, he is Tristan Stephenson, what's that bald cunt called? He's sort of the molecular gastronomist of drinks, essentially. Like there's a cocktail on most of the pages, and it breaks it down by like vodka, gin, different kinds of spirits. So we've got one here which is the Pearl, classic ingredient, classic method, and then on the other side he tries to do an improved version. So this is kind of like his gastronomic, kind of showy-offy version that he's not expecting you to do at home. He's just kind of showing off how he does it. Because it's so complicated that you're not going to try it at home. Most people don't make normal cocktails at home. You're definitely not going to make a super wanky version. But I love it in regards to that. It shows what is possible. It's not necessarily what you're going to do, but it shows what is possible. There is one in this one, actually. Where are we? There's one here which is the claret, and it just uses blood, just straight up blood in there. There's actually a note in the front about like sort of using blood safely and how to store it. I told a colleague about mine about this about 8 months ago, and he was like, "That's too far. I'm not doing that." So yeah, also sherry cobbler, so you know it's got my vote straight away. The gin one is a little bit different. Obviously, again, it goes into the history, as do all these books. You know, the history of gin. I think we all know at this point. It talks about your key botanicals, things like licorice, orris root, juniper, obviously, and then it goes through individual bottles and the sort of distilleries. So again, similar to what Dave Broom does, kind of like the history behind it, but also what their output is. You know, the different kinds that they make, what they're like, what he thinks of them, what they would go well in. Some of the photography is a little bit dated, like Heyman's, for example. They changed their design. Obviously, you're going to have no control over that. You're going to use what you've got, so, you know, over time, these are going to date a little bit. But it's, again, it's brilliantly written, and it's not pretentious, which is weird given all the kind of nonsensical crap that he's coming out with. Well, it's not nonsensical, but it's like, you know, almost fantasy level. You know, you'd expect to see it like in Quark's bar in DS9 or something. And same with the rum, but with the rum one, it's a bit more colourful. Which is unusual for his style. Like, you know, you don't see colourful pages in any of the other books. So it's, you know, it kind of celebrates a bit more kind of like of that sort of party-esque atmosphere that rum has. And again, the writing of this one is fantastic. It goes through like different distilleries and different bottlings. Of the ones that I've read, I'd say that I've read this one the least. But I still love it. I still think it's a fantastic book. Anything by Tristan Stephenson, you should think of picking up, and he writes on just about everything. If you're into your coffee as well, he's big into his coffee, and he has written about that as well. Some of my thoughts on books about booze. Let me know down below. Are you reading anything at the minute about a particular topic? Doesn't necessarily have to be about alcohol, though if you are, do let me know that as well. Are there any particular authors of fiction or non-fiction that you're a big fan of? Let me know down below as well. Thumb this video if you enjoyed it or you found it informative, and if you like this sort of content, similar but not quite the same, subscribe to the channel because I talk about liquor a lot. If that's your kind of jam, then we're going to get along just fine. For now though, thank you very much for watching, and do join me next time where I'll be drinking something.